Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Shevuot, and this is our 7th and final class of this Masechet. For those of you who did not receive the email, please register for the next Masechet, which will be Masechet Avodah Zarah, which we are going to begin next week. Okay, and here we go. We have a lot to do today because the Masechet actually ends tomorrow, so we actually have 8 dapim to do together today. Okay, we are in the middle of discussing oaths that are taken, that are court-imposed, and we're going to see that they're actually biblical oaths that are written about in the Torah. And the one that we are discussing now in Hebrew is called modeh b'miktzat, which means that there is a claim, then there is an acknowledgement of the loan, or, yes, I owe you a certain amount of money, but not the amount that you said. I only owe you half or something like that. It doesn't have to be half. It just has to be an acknowledgement of the debt, but a different amount. Okay, so Daf 42, so we're going to have a lot of cases today. So Daf 42, the case is a person says, give me the 600 zuz that you owe me. And the person says, I paid you back, but I paid you with gall nuts. This is what they actually used to make ink that a scribe would use. So he says, I paid you back. Then the person says, well, it was only worth 400 zuz. And then witnesses come and say, yes, it was worth 400. Now, remember, the original loan was 600. So the question is this considered modeh b'miktzat? Is it where the person admitted to part of the loan? The Gemara says, no. He said, I paid it back in full. You're now arguing on how much the gall nuts were worth, but he basically said, I paid it in full, and therefore he has to pay back the rest of the loan. Okay, next, the person says, give me the 100 zuz that you owe me, and here is the document that says that you owe me. The person says, I paid you back. He said, no, you gave me money, but that was for another loan that you owed me. So the Gemara says, no, you can't collect with that document anymore because, again, the person admitted that he paid something back. We're not sure which loan that was for. Now, if it was paid in front of witnesses, so then the document is considered weakened and you cannot use it. And if not, then it isn't. Next case. A person says, I trust you as if you are like 2 witnesses, and therefore I'm going to pay you, right? The guy says, I want you to pay me back, and I trust you as if you're 2 witnesses, so you can pay me back in front, like not in front of anybody. It's as if you paid me back in front of 2 witnesses. And then he ends up paying him in front of 3 witnesses. And then the lender says, wait a minute, you never paid me back. So the Gemara says there's no difference between 2 and 3 witnesses, and therefore it's not any stronger, and it's a similar case. Let's say they say, I trust you like 3 witnesses. Now, we know 3 witnesses isn't something significant, meaning 2 witnesses is significant. More than 2, it just is more. So let's say he paid in front of 4, and then it's about the numbers. 3 versus 4 people, that's about the number. And therefore, 4 people is better than 3. And it's different if you said 2 as opposed to 3. Okay, now the Gemara tells us that a minor cannot take an oath because they don't have full knowledge, full da'at. But you can swear to them. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, what is this case that you can swear to a minor? So it's a machloket, right? Rav says that the minor is claiming a loan for his father. Right, so what's the case? The person tells the orphan that he borrowed 100 zuz from his father, but he paid half already. So then he swears, meaning the borrower swears, and pays the other half. Okay, so this is a case where he made a claim and then he swore to the minor. Or maybe it's that he doesn't need to swear because it's just like returning a lost item. So then maybe the question is, maybe the case is that the minor comes to the person and says, you owed my father money. So now, wait a minute. What is this? We've been talking about the concept of modeh b'miktzat. So the question is, what is this? So the Gemara explains a person wouldn't be brazen enough to deny everything, right? You owe me $100. No, what are you talking about? I never borrowed any money. That's like flat out lying. So the Gemara says people generally do not flat out lie. And therefore, when they say, you know what, I only owe you 50, what really are they saying? Maybe, right, first of all, maybe they only owe 50, but maybe they owe 100, but they're embarrassed that they don't have the 100. So they say, I'll owe you 50 because maybe you'll leave me alone for another day or two so I can get the money. And therefore, in that case, you're going to swear how much you really owe, and then that works. But maybe you will be brazen in front of the son of the person that you owe money to. And therefore, if he admits to only owing half, so we believe him because, again, there's no reason for him to lie in this case. So we believe him. If the son is sure that, if he's sure that he owes him money, then he does have to swear. Meaning, what's the issue of an orphan? Right here, the issue is an orphan where he doesn't know. Did the father borrow money? Does the person owe him the money or not? But if he's sure that the person owes him money, so then he can make him swear. Shmuel says a person is trying to collect. So that was Rav's opinion on what the case is. Now Shmuel's opinion is that the person is trying to collect from the minor, right? Rav said that the minor is trying to collect from the other person. Shmuel says that the person is trying to collect from the minor. Your father owed me money. So then he swears and he collects from the orphan. And so the Gemara says you always need to swear to collect from orphans, right? Minors or even adults. Okay. Now the next Mishnah says you don't have to take an oath, a biblical oath, for the following things: 1, slaves, a document, land, or sanctified items, right? Hekdesh, things that were sanctified. And you don't pay, double for these things. And you don't take an oath of guardians for these things. We're going to talk about that at the end of today's class. And things that are sanctified, that you have responsibility for, you have achrayut for, so then you do have to swear about it. But if not, then you don't. Then the Gemara gives a case, the Mishnah gives a case. I gave you 10 grapevines filled with grapes. The person says, I only got 5. So the question is this a machloket about land, right? Because land is a plot of land. Vines are attached to the land, so we're not sure if they're like the land or not. Then the Mishnah tells us that a claim, right, the claim that we've been discussing of modeh b'miktzat, or you owe me money, or you owe me this, needs to be something defined. It needs to have a measurement, a weight or a number, and if not, you cannot take an oath about it, right? You owe me a bag of potatoes. A bag of potatoes is not specific enough. I need 5 kilos of potatoes or 10 potatoes. A bag is not specific enough, and therefore you do not have to take an oath for that sort of claim. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain that for kefel is the double, the penalty of paying double if something is stolen. You only pay for things, you only pay double for things that are movable. And we've seen this before. This is based on the principle of klal, frat, klal, where we interpret the verses because they have a certain structure, and therefore we learn that in order to have to pay a penalty of double, it has to be something that is movable and has inherent value. Therefore, it excludes land, which is not movable. You can't move land. Slaves, because they're like land. A document, because it does not have inherent value, right? It's right, as we say, it's not worth the paper it's written on, right? But here it's not, right? It's, if you sell a house for $1 million and you just have a piece of paper, right? Obviously the paper does not have the value of the sale. And it doesn't work for sanctified items because they are not owned by a person, they're owned by God, so to speak. You also don't pay 4 and 5 times enough, and because that's connected to the double penalty. Okay, Daf 43 tells us that when a what's called in Hebrew shomer chinam, this is a person who is watching over an item for you as a favor. Chinam means for free. They're not getting paid. Also, the verse explains that this is only for things that are movable and valuable. Therefore, it excludes land, slaves, document, and sanctified items. A hired watchman is liable for something, some things, but not for others. And we are going to discuss this at the end of today's class. The Mishnah mentioned vines and grapes, and we said we're not sure, is it land or is it seen not attached to the land, even though it's attached to the land, but it's not the same rule as land. So the Gemara tells us it's a machloket. If something is connected to the land, so then it's like land, and therefore you cannot take an oath in the case of, right, I sold you 10 grapevines, or maybe it is seen as not, right, it's seen as different than the land that it's on, and therefore you could take an oath. That's a machloket. The Gemara says no. The machloket isn't about the vines. Everybody agrees that the vines are like land. With the machloket is the grapes, right? The grapes, if they're ready to be picked, so then they're seen as if they were already picked and they're movable objects. Or no, because the grapes are still attached to the vine, maybe they're seen as the land and not like they're movable objects. Let's say a person says, you owe me a whole house of stuff, right? I lent you my house full of stuff and I want it all back. So you don't swear because it's not a defined amount. Remember we said a bag of X is not a defined amount. I need a weight, a measurement, or a number. But if I say the house was filled till this line with whatever, fill in the blank, then that's a measurement because I said filled till the beam. And then you would have to swear for that case. Let's say I say, you owe me a kur of grain. It's an amount. No, I don't owe you anything. you are exempt from an oath. Remember, we said that when are you liable? When you agree that you owe, right, a part of the claim, right? And here, if you deny the whole thing, you are not liable to take this oath. Let's say I say, you owe me a big candelabra, and I say, no, I owe you a small candelabra. You are also exempt. The Gemara does not see that as a partial admission. It sees it as a different item, even though it's smaller versus bigger. Right? Again, you owe me a kur of grain. Oh, I only owe you half a kur. That you are liable because I said only half of what you said that I owe you. And therefore, that is the difference in the claim. Okay, next Mishnah is going to talk about a person took out a loan and gave a collateral. And now the lender lost the collateral, right? So the collateral is lost. And now the question is, what happens to the loan? Okay, so now the Mishnah is going to explain. You took out a loan of 100 shekel, let's say, and you gave a collateral worth, The person says, the lender says, I lent you 100 shekel, and you gave me a collateral that was worth 50, and I lost it. So now you owe me 50 shekel, right? Because 50 was the collateral. I lost it. You owe me 50. The borrower says, no, the collateral was worth 75. I only owe you 25. Okay, this is modeh b'miktzat, right? He says you only owe, right? I owe 50. You owe me 50. The person says, no, I owe you 25. That's a partial admission. Therefore, they have to take an oath. Okay, let's say, so now we're going to get some math in here, or we'll say Talmudic coin values. So I'll just tell you the values and I'll read it through. But the bottom line is that the lender says that the collateral was worth less, and the borrower is going to say that the collateral is worth more. Okay, so I'm just putting that out there. I'll tell you the details, but if it gets too confusing, just understand that that's the issue. So in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, a sela is worth 2 shekel, and 1 shekel is worth 4 dinar, right? Therefore, 1 sela is 4 dinar, okay? Okay, so now, right, I lent you a sela, and the collateral was worth a shekel, and then the person says, no, the collateral was worth a sela. So now I don't have to, right? I don't have to pay anything. So if he says I don't have to pay anything, there's no oath because he didn't partially admit, right? But if he says, I lent you a sela and it was worth a shekel, the collateral is worth a shekel, he says, no, it was worth 3 dinar instead of 4, right? So I only owe you 1 dinar. Okay, so now you have to swear how much it was worth, right? You lent me a sela and the collateral was 2 sela. Okay, this is different. Now the borrower is saying that the collateral was worth more than the loan. I don't know why you gave that collateral, but okay. It was worth more than the loan. So now the borrower says to the lender, you owe me money because you lost my collateral, right? So you owe me a sela. Then the lender says, no, it was only worth a sela, right? Meaning it's a wash and you don't owe me anything. I don't owe you, you don't owe me. So again, it's exempt because there's no partial admission. But if there is partial admission, then you need to swear. And then another opinion is that then the Mishnah says the person who had the collateral is the one who needs to swear, right? The lender is the one who needs to swear because he's the one that lost the collateral. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain, right? In what case is the Mishnah telling us that the person with the collateral has to swear, right? Isn't it obvious So they say, obviously, it's in the last case where the collateral was worth more than the loan, right? And even in the first cases. So again, we said if the lender loses the collateral, he can't collect. So in the Mishnah, we spoke about the value of the loan and the value of the collateral. But now the Gemara says that if the lender loses the collateral, he can't collect the loan, period. It doesn't matter how much money was owed. If he loses the collateral, he cannot collect the loan. And then the Gemara says, or do we look at the value of the collateral and deduct that from the value of the loan, right? That's what the Mishnah says, right? The loan was worth, 100. The collateral was worth 50. You owe me 50, right? That's one opinion. Another opinion is, I gave you my gold watch. You lost the gold watch. I'm not paying you $1,000, right? You lost my collateral. I'm not paying for the loan. So that's a machloket. If you lose the collateral, you still owe the loan, and it's actually a machloket in the Mishnah. If again, we have to see the value, the value of the collateral. So if the collateral was the same value as the loan, everybody agrees that you cannot collect the loan. But if it was less, there's a machloket if the collateral, right, what's the collateral there for? Is it to just remind you about the loan, or is it seen as payment, right? If I don't pay it, so then you can keep my gold watch, right? That's the question. Okay. So the Gemara gives different proofs on is the collateral seen as a reminder of the loan, or is it payment? Right? Maybe, again, the person that's watching over a lost item, maybe that's like the collateral. The Gemara talks about the fact that the lender is called doing a mitzvah when they lend money, and when they return, and they're seen as righteous when they return the collateral. Therefore, it's seen as payment. Okay, and the last thing of this chapter is about Shemitah, right? Shemitah, the 7th year, cancels out loans unless the loan has a collateral. If the loan has a collateral, then it's not canceled. So then it discusses, even if the collateral is the value of half the loan, or no, the value of the collateral needs to be the same value of the loan. And if it's less, then only that part of the loan is not canceled, but the rest of it is. And with that, we finish the 6th chapter. Don't worry, we're doing 2 more chapters. Okay. Next, the Mishnah tells us, okay, we're going to have actually a very long Mishnah. It's the whole parak, so it's a lot of Mishnayot, and then we'll get to the Gemara. Okay, the Mishnah says, people who swear a biblical oath, right, a shevuat deoraita, they swear and they don't pay, right? That's the nature of a biblical oath. The following people swear a rabbinic oath, and they swear and they collect money. Who are those people? A hired worker, a victim of theft, a victim of assault, a litigant who the other guy is suspected of lying, and a storekeeper. And the Mishnah is going to go through each one of these things. A worker. What's the case of the worker? The worker comes to the employer and he says, right, I worked today, give me my wages. Employer says, I paid you already. He says, no, you didn't. So the worker swears and takes the money. Or maybe the boss needs to admit that he paid some of it. Oh, I paid you already, but I only owed you 100, and you're saying I owed you 200. Then it becomes modeh b'miktzat, right? He admits to some, and then there is an oath. Okay, what is the idea of theft? Witnesses see Reuven taking a collateral from Shimon without permission from Shimon, from the borrower. And then the borrower says, you took my vase. No, I didn't. So then Shimon, right, the borrower of the original loan, can swear that the lender took the collateral, and then he can collect that collateral. Or another opinion is that, again, Reuven, the lender, needs to have admitted to part of it. What's the person with injury? Witnesses see a person go into someone's house, and when they leave, they're all beaten up. And then he says, you beat me up? No, I didn't. So the person who is beaten up swears that that person beat him up, and then he can collect the money for damages. Or again, he needs to admit to part of the claim. Someone who in Hebrew it's called chashud al hashvuah. We suspect that he is a liar, right? So he's made a false oath previously, or he's a gambler, or he lends with interest. So that person, because we don't trust him, cannot take an oath. Therefore, the other person can swear and collect. Instead of the original person swearing and not collecting, this person now swears and collects. If both of them are suspected of lying, so then it goes back to the original guy, because what's the difference, right? They're both liars. Or no, nobody takes an oath because they're both liars, and you split the money, right? You owe me 100, no, I don't. So 50 goes to him and 50 goes to him. Okay, what's the case of a storekeeper, right? The person who owns a store. A person tells him, can you give my son some wheat? Oh, I gave it already. No, you didn't. So then the storekeeper swears that he did, and he can collect payment from the person in the neighborhood. And the son or the worker swears that they didn't get anything, and then they can collect, right? The opposite, right? The son can say, wait, my father told you to give me money and you didn't, so he can swear and collect. Or each collects even without an oath, and we'll discuss what that means. Okay, let's say another case. You go to the store and you say, give me a kilo of apples. And he gives it to him. And then he says, okay, so now give me $5. And he says, what are you talking about? I already gave you $5. So what happens? The customer swears that he paid and he can leave. Okay, now flip the case, right? The customer gives the money to the store owner and he says, okay, now give me the apples. And he's like, I gave you the apples already. So the storekeeper swears that he gave the apples, and then he doesn't need to give it to him again. And then the Mishnah says, whoever is holding the apples, whoever is holding the produce, has the upper hand. In Hebrew, we say yado elionah, right? So he has literally the upper hand, and that person does not need to swear. It's the other person that needs to swear. Now we have a case with a money changer, right? So you tell the money changer, okay, right, I'll give you $100. Give me, lots of $5 bills. So give me all those small coins, and he gives it to him. And then the money changer says, okay, now give me the $100 bill. And he's like, I gave it to you already. So then the person swears, and then he doesn't need to pay. Now the opposite, right? He gives him $100, and he's like, okay, now give me it all in fives. And he's like, I gave it to you already. So then the money changer swears, and he doesn't have to pay. Another case, a woman admits that she had a ketuvah, and the husband paid some of it, but not all of it. So she has to swear that she received a part of it, and she didn't receive the rest, and then she can collect. If one witness says that she collected it already, so then she needs to swear to collect the rest. If she wants to collect from land that was already sold by the husband, or from the orphans, so then she needs to swear in order to collect her ktuva money. Orphans are also can swear to collect from their father's debts, or people that owed the father. The following people need to swear in order to collect money: a partner, a sharecropper, or an administrator. Right? What do they have to swear? They have to swear that they managed all of the money, right? Because again, in all of these cases, they're managing other people's money as well. So they have to swear that they manage the money properly, and then they can collect whatever is owed to them. If, let's say, they're not partners anymore, you cannot make the person swear about the past. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, right? A biblical oath, as we said, you swear and you don't pay, right? It means I swear I paid everything that I needed to pay, so then that's it. You swear and you don't pay. Okay, let's go back to the people we mentioned. A hired worker can swear and receive money, right? Why? Because the rabbis wanted to make sure that, right, basically employees' rights, and they wanted to protect the worker. And therefore, we give, right, the rabbis gave the power to the worker and took it away from the employer, right? We want to make sure that the person is going to be a proper employer. And also there's a lot of psychology here, because the Gemara says, right, maybe it's because the employer doesn't necessarily remember if he's paying 10 different people, he might not remember. And therefore he can't swear, right? But the worker knows if he got paid or not, and therefore he can swear. But if the worker and the employer disagree about the amount he was going to pay, we believe the employer, right? The person who, right, when you hire somebody, you know exactly how much you agreed to pay. The worker might say, oh, no, I did such a good job, you should really pay me double. No, we agreed on a certain price. Okay, also the Gemara says, again, like psychologically, the Torah assumes, right, there's a mitzvah that says that if you have a worker that's meant to be paid every day, right, a daily worker, you need, right, there's a mitzvah that you have to pay them at the end of every day. You can't say, oh, come back to me in a month, I'll pay you. No, right? If the agreement was that you were going to pay at the end of the day, you must pay at the end of the day. Therefore, if the worker comes the next day to ask for money, we don't believe him because we assume that the employer paid at the end of the day. All of this is if the worker was hired in front of witnesses, and therefore it's a trusted worker. If not, then no, because we don't necessarily trust him. Okay, daf 46. In order to take the money, they have to bring proof. This is another principle. I think we've seen it before. The principle in Hebrew is called hamotzi michavero alav hara'aya, which means the person who wants to collect money from somebody else, if you want to collect the money, you need to bring the proof, right? The burden of proof is on the one who wants to collect the money. And therefore, right, if they argue about how much is owed, right? So if the employee wants more money, so then he has to prove that really you hired me for that higher amount. Okay, let's say we have a craftsman and he says, we agreed on 2 sla'im, right? You were going to pay me 2. And then the person says, no, we agreed on 1. So the balabait, right? The person who, I guess we could say, hired the craftsman swears because he for sure will remember. Or no, maybe the opposite. The craftsman can bring proof. Oh no, I have a WhatsApp that said that you were going to pay me too, right? Always have things in writing, and then he can collect the money. Okay, now the question is, where is the item, right? So as long as the craftsman has the item in his possession, so then the owner of the item needs to bring proof on what they agreed on, right? But if the craftsman returned the item, so if it's within the agreed time, the craftsman can swear how much we agreed on, and then he can collect the money that he wants. But if he comes after the time, so then the craftsman is the one who has to bring proof in order to collect. Okay, let's go to the worker. Okay, so a worker, if it's within the time that he's owed the money, remember we said, if it's within that day and he says, come and you didn't pay me, right? So he can swear and collect. But if the time passed, no, because again, we assume that if the time passed, we assume that the employer already paid him. Rabbi Yehuda says, wait a minute, if they're arguing about how much is owed and the employer says, wait, we agreed on, right, on 50, not on 100. So then, right, again, if he admits to partially, to part of that, so then the worker can swear and then collect the money. Okay, we have the case of a theft, the theft of collateral. So now the Gemara explains, right, let's say the guy says, right, I'm going to collect my collateral from, I don't remember the names that we said. Reuven goes and says, I lent Shimon money, I'm going to his house to collect collateral. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute, sometimes people exaggerate, right? Even though he said he was going to collect the collateral, maybe he didn't. Maybe he went in and stole something. You don't necessarily know. The Gemara says, wait a minute, but he says he was going to get collateral and he got something. So maybe he did. So the Gemara says, again, like psychologically, let's see. How did he leave the house? Did he hide something under his coat? So then it looks a little suspicious. Right? So then if that's the case, the homeowner can swear and collect what he took. Let's say he says, what do you mean? I didn't steal this. I bought it from him. So if the, again, the homeowner sells things from his house, so then that could make sense. But if he doesn't sell things from his house, so then we don't believe him, and we assume that he was guilty. Again, it really depends on the situation. Okay, the case where someone gets injured, right? So he comes out bruised. So we said he swears and he collects money for the damages. If it's in a place that he couldn't have done it to himself, so then he actually collects damages without swearing, because how else would have he gotten hurt? So the Gemara says, well, he could have like smacked himself on the back. So it says, no, there was a bite mark on his back. Then for sure, this person did it, and he doesn't have to take an oath. He can just collect. Okay, we said if the other guy is suspected of lying, even if it was like just a lie, right? Like, oh, do you see my new car? This is obviously not a car, it's a cup. Even if he lies like that, we still don't believe him, and he is not trusted. Daf 47, if both of them are suspected of lying, so then we said either the oath goes back to the original person or they split the amount, right? So the Gemara says, wait a minute, what's the original person? Maybe it means the oath that we took at Har Sinai that God said, don't steal. And when it says that it goes back to that, maybe it means the court says, you know what, you're both a bunch of liars. I don't believe anything you say. You guys leave my courtroom and you figure it out on your own. Meaning the court says we're not getting involved, right? Or again, if the person admitted to part of it, so then they should swear, but since they can't, so then he has to pay. Okay, back to, we mentioned the orphans are collecting from other orphans, right? So it's basically the children of the lender and the children of the borrower, right? The fathers died, and basically the Gemara says it depends on who died first. That is who needs to swear to who. And the Gemara explains like the different permutations. Okay, the storekeeper who swears and is believed, it's because there's a reason why the customer would owe him money, right? The customer told the storekeeper, I need you to pay my worker. So then maybe both of them swear, right? The worker swears that he didn't get the money, or the storekeeper swears that he gave him the money, or nobody swears. Right? Again, okay, then there's another case of two sets of witnesses, and if they contradict each other, if they testify alone, we trust each set alone, because I don't know who's telling the truth, or you don't trust either of them, or maybe it depends, right, if it's two separate cases, or is it one case? So Daf 48, the Gemara tells us, and we learned this with Rosh Chodesh, right? There are two sets of, there are two witnesses, and there's a discrepancy of the height of the moon, right? If it's a small discrepancy, so then we accept it because, you know, you're off a little bit. So we say, oh, you're not lying. You're just like, you're a little bit off. But if there's a big discrepancy, one of them is lying, and we don't accept the testimony. But if another witness comes and it matches up with one of the other people, you could take one and join him with the other. So the Gemara says that's only when we're talking about Rosh Chodesh, the new month, but not about money, right? We don't play around with different sets of witnesses when we're talking about money. Okay, remember we had the case of the money changer and the person in the store, right? Again, the Gemara talks about that a store owner and a money changer are not going to give money before they get, or they're not going to give things before they get, right? Generally, right, you pay money and then you get the produce, right? You give $100 bill and then they give you five, you know, they give it to you in fives, right? It's not going to be the other way around. And therefore, we believe them because that's the way they do business. Okay. Then the Gemara talks about the widow. Let's say, again, the widow dies without collecting. So we're talking about orphans, and the orphans swearing whether the father was owed the money or owes money. So the Gemara talks about a widow who died without collecting her ketuvah. So the heirs can collect it for up to 25 years. But that's only if she already swore that she didn't get her ketuvah, right? They can't swear because they don't know. And okay, then what about, right? A son can collect sometimes with an oath, sometimes without an oath, but a father can only collect with an oath, right? So again, it depends if they know that the father was owed the money, or was not owed the money. Okay, let's say someone swears without a claim of for sure, right? You for sure owe me $100, but with a claim of maybe, then, right, so that's a different case, right? If I'm not sure versus I'm sure. Then we said, right, the following people, right, need to swear, right? Partners, sharecroppers, right? All of these people have a rationale to take money, right? Meaning they are in charge of the books. Because they're in charge of the books, they, you know, might say, oh, you know, I work so hard, I'm going to give myself an extra $100. Because of that, we make them swear that they didn't do that. Okay. Then, okay. Then the Gemara at the top of Daf 49 says that you, there is something called Gilgul Shevuot, meaning, or it's called like rolling over an oath, right? If you owe me an oath for one thing, I can make you take an oath about another thing. but you cannot roll over an oath to a hired worker, but every other oath you can actually roll over. Okay, the last daf of the Masechet is also the last chapter of the Masechet. Again, very long Mishnayot and a little bit of Gemara at the end. The last type of oaths is called, in Hebrew, it's called Shevuat HaShomrim, the oath of the guardians or custodians, right? You ask someone to watch something for you. They have certain liability and responsibility, and they take an oath. So we have learned this before. There are 4 types of shomrim, 4 types of guardians, right? Shomer chinam, someone who's just doing you a favor and not getting paid. Shoel is the opposite, someone who borrows something from you, right? So they have full responsibility. Shomer sachar, someone who you're paying to watch your item, and a socher, someone who rents your item. Okay, so now the Mishnah is going to go through each one of these shomrim, each one of these guardians, and what they're responsible for. Obviously, the more you're getting paid, the more responsibility you have, and the less, the less. Okay, so shomer chinam, who's not getting anything, is just doing you a favor. He takes an oath about everything, meaning he doesn't ever have to pay if he lost something or got damaged. Listen, I'm doing you a favor. It's not my fault it got lost. So that person can just take an oath. I'm so sorry, I lost your item, I don't know where it is, and then they're not responsible to pay. A shoel, someone who borrows something, he has full responsibility, right? Because I'm borrowing your car, right? I can't be like, oops, so sorry, I lost your car, right? There's no such thing. If you borrow something, you have to pay for everything. Therefore, you can't take an oath. I swear I lost it, right? It's lost, because it doesn't matter. Even if you swear, you still have to pay. If you still have to pay, you don't take an oath, right? That's the idea. The point of the oath is to exempt you from payment. If I can't exempt you from payment, you don't take an oath. The person who rents and the person who's being paid to watch, they have a similar rules, that they can take an oath about breakage, or it was stolen, or it died, and then they don't have to pay in those 3 cases, but they are responsible if it got lost or stolen, and therefore, if that's going to be the claim, they're not going to take an oath. Okay, now the Gemara is going to have, the Mishnah has, I was just going to say 100 cases, but not 100 cases, a lot of cases. Basically, I'll just summarize and then I'll read through it. If the person in that scenario, right, is claiming something where they wouldn't have to pay, so then they take an oath and they're exempt from paying. But if they have a responsibility to pay, they cannot take an oath because it doesn't matter. They still have to pay. That's the rule. Okay, now I'll read all the cases, right? So the owner says, where's my ox? And then the shomer chinam, the person who's doing a favor, says, oh, I'm so sorry, it died. But really, it was stolen or lost, or, right, either way, right, any claim, right, it died, it was lost, it died, like anything that he says, and he says, swear to me that you're telling the truth. So then, and he swears, and let's say he lied, he's exempt from a sacrifice because he didn't need to pay for any of these things. And therefore, remember we said that if you lied on an oath that would have made you pay for something, then you're liable to bring a sacrifice because there were consequences to your lie. However, in this case, where the person did not have to pay for anything, so even though they lied with the oath, it doesn't matter, right? If it was lost or stolen or died, it doesn't matter. I mean, you shouldn't lie, but even though he lied, it didn't change the outcome of the scenario, and therefore the person is not liable to bring a sacrifice. Okay, another scenario. Where's my ox? I don't know what you're talking about. You never gave me an ox. And then he swears and he lied. Again, he's exempt because he's denying that he was even a shomer in the first place. Again, where is my ox? Oh, it got lost. And then he swears. And then witnesses come and say, I saw him have a huge barbecue. He ate, he had lots of meat and it was your ox. So then he has to pay for that, the value of the animal, but no sacrifice. But if he admits that he lied, then he needs to bring a sacrifice and pay for not only pay for the animal, but pay for lying. Again, where is my ox? Oh, it was stolen. And then he takes an oath, and then witnesses come and say, oh, he stole it. Okay, so then he has to pay double, right? This is the case of stealing. If he admits to lying, so then he has to bring a sacrifice. Again, you stole my ox. No, I didn't. Witnesses say he did. Again, he has to pay double. If he admits before the witnesses come, so then he only pays the value of the ox. A person borrowed an ox, and then he says, oh, I'm so sorry, it died, or it was lost, and he lied. So then if he swears, he's exempt from bringing a sacrifice because, again, he still owes money. I don't care that you swore. You still owe money because a borrower is liable to pay no matter what. Again, person borrowed and claimed, what are you talking about? I never borrowed your ox, but really it died or it was stolen, and he swears. He is liable for a sacrifice because the oath would have gotten him out of paying, and now he needs to pay. So not only does he have to pay, he also has to bring a sacrifice for lying. Let's say it's a paid custodian or a renter, and he says, oh, I'm so sorry, your ox died. But really, it broke its leg, or it was captured or lost or stolen, and he swears. He's exempt from a sacrifice because he's liable for theft, and therefore he has to pay anyway. But if he claims the thing that they're not liable for, so then he does not have to bring a sacrifice, right? But if he says it was captured, but really it was lost or stolen, he's liable to bring a sacrifice because it's different liability. If he says it was lost or stolen, but really it was captured, then he is exempt, meaning he took upon himself more responsibility. Okay, and now the Mishnah gives like a sikum, right, a summary. Therefore, if the oath changed from, right, didn't change anything, you owe money and you still owe money, or you didn't owe money and now you still don't owe money, or you didn't owe money and now you do owe money, in all of those cases, if you lied, you do not have to bring a sacrifice because the oath didn't cause you to pay money. However, right, if you would have been exempt, you would have had to have paid, and now when you took the oath, you got exempt from paying. So then you would have to. Then you'd be liable for a sacrifice. Okay, the Gemara now says that again. So now there's a machloket Rav and Shmuel, right? The oaths that we just said. So you're exempt from bringing a sacrifice of the oath of the guardian, of the custodian, but you would still be liable for lying. Remember, in the beginning of the Masechet, so this is a good review, in the beginning of the Masechet, we said, Shevuat bitui, right? I will eat bread or I won't eat bread. But we also had, I did eat bread or I didn't eat bread, right? So if you say you did do something or you didn't do something and you lied, that is called transgress, like not fulfilling this oath. So if you're lying as a guardian, even though you might be exempt because of this specific issue, you should still be liable for lying, right? You're lying. Shmuel says no. You're also exempt from shevuat bitui, because if you remember, and again, this is a good review, if you remember, there was a machloket if an oath cannot be flipped. And now there's two ways to flip an oath. One is flipping it from past to future. The other is flipping it from yes to no. And if you remember, in the beginning of the Masechah, we had a machloket, which one is, how do you understand a valid oath, right? So according to Shmuel, because you can't flip this to I will steal your ox or I will lose your ox, there's no such thing. Because I can't flip it to the future, it's not seen as a valid shevuat bitui, a valid oath, and therefore you would not be liable. Rav says, no, it's about flipping it yes and no. It's lost, it's not lost. It's stolen, it was stolen, it wasn't stolen. That works, and therefore if you do that, you would still be liable. Okay, right now, if you say, I don't know what you're talking about, and you borrowed it, or right, you said it was lost or stolen for the renter and the paid shomer, so then you would be liable, right? Because they both deny owing any money, so then they would be liable for the oath of the guardians and not liable for shevuat bitui. And with that, we finish Masechet Shevuot. I'm happy to open it up to any questions, comments. I do want to end with just one idea. I think that after we learn this Masechet, I think really the lesson that I'm taking from it is the value and the power that we have with our words. And I think nowadays, this is lost. I think people don't care what they say. Like I said before, I say this all the time, right? People are like, I swear to God. No, don't swear to God. Just tell me the truth. I think people, lie or, what's the word? Bend the truth very often, even with little insignificant things. Oh, I went to bed at 2. Really? I went to bed at 3. Who cares, right? But I think that this Masechet is teaching us, first of all, when you read the Masechet, you realize how powerful the words are, right? How we assume that everyone is telling the truth unless proven otherwise. And I think that it's a hope that we go back to that. I think, I had this case where I went to a store and I wanted to return something because it was broken, and the store owner said, well, how do I know, that this happened? And I said, because I'm telling you that it happened. He's like, but I don't know if I could, and I was like, that's so sad. That's so sad that you can't believe what people say. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we should go back to the days of being trustworthy. And if I'm already speaking, so also things are crazy here. So sending love to everyone who's here in Israel and support. And it is just so nice to be able to learn with all of you. Okay. Opening it up for a few minutes. Yes.
Just this quick comment. I turned 81 yesterday, and I've outlived every female in my family, but it's really on Shalech Lecha. That's when I was born. But yeah, I consider you all my friends, so I just wanted to tell you. I have more fun here than I have any other time during the week.
Mazal
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
That is so exciting.
I don't even know some of you, but I look at your names all the time. Yeah, that's all. Of course I have questions. Now go to the next person.
Yes, any other questions, comments? First of all, I hope you're all celebrating our siyum for finishing this Masechet. It's very important to celebrate with friends and family. So I think this is huge accomplishment. For some of you, it is many years in the making, and we have 2 more years, by the way, 2 more years, and then we finish all of Shas. Can you believe it? Unbelievable.
Bezrat Hashem. You should say Bezrat Hashem.
Be'ezrat Hashem, exactly.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Very excited for the next one. I have been waiting for that one the whole time. That one is going to be amazing, as they all are. And again, just so excited to be in the company of these women on this important day, this dramatic time, where we are so excited and joyful to be discussing the Torah and to be putting our thoughts and energies on that and to be looking ahead with a good eye and good hope.
Amen. Beautiful. Amen.
Yeah, but Lee, you also said this about Jewish law. Remember that one?
It's all right.
Yeah. So I have on a fun note, I have a joke to tell. So we're talking about somebody watching over things and returning and borrowing and stuff like that. So a neighbor comes to the neighbor and asks for a cup of sugar. And a week later, they bring back 2 cups of sugar. Okay. And then time goes by and that same neighbor comes to borrow a cup of oil. And so a week later, they come back with 2 cups of oil. Wow, okay. After a while, that same neighbor comes and asks to borrow a pair of candelabra. And they say, okay, wait a minute, with the sugar, I gave him 1 and I gave him back 2. And with the oil, I gave him 1 and gave back 2. If I give him 2 candelabra, he's going to bring me back 4. Okay, so happily gives him the candelabra. A week goes by, a month goes by, 2 months go by, and nothing. So he goes back to the neighbor, and he goes, oh, I forgot to say, every time he said, why did you bring me 2? He said, because it gave birth to another one. So so when he comes to the neighbor and he says, what happened? You didn't return the candelabra. He goes, oh, it died. So he goes, what do you mean it died?
I actually got it.
So he goes, well, if the sugar and the oil can give birth to another one of them, the candelabra can die.
Candle died. I thought you meant that.
Candelabra.
I think that was cute. I enjoyed. That's my birthday joke. Thank you.
It's just a joke. It's just a joke. It's a Jewish-minded joke.
About the material the Rabbanit covered. Didn't you have more respect for the court when they finally threw their hands up in the air and said, "This is Meshuggah. Get out! Had enough." Because in She's Bride, how in the world did they know that anyone was telling the truth?
Yes, and also along with the being surprised that you wouldn't be trusted, I've had the opposite reaction where I've brought back, whatever extra money, you gave me too much or whatever to the store. And the store is just unbelievable. I can't believe that you would be so honest to return it. And that is also very sad because that should be normal.
So I had a case where I in the self-checkout counter, so I put in squash when I should have put in zucchini, and at that moment the price was different. So I came home and I saw it. So then a week later, I came back to the store and I said, "Listen, I punched in squash, but it should have been zucchini, so I owe you money." And they're looking at it and comparing. She's doing the numbers. She's doing the numbers. She's doing the numbers. She goes, "Okay, you owe me 1 shekel." And I go, "No, I owe you a lot more." And the branch owner was saying, "1 shekel, forget it."
Yeah, that happened to me too. I tried to tell him that there was a basket inside the basket. He only charged me for the 1 basket. There were 2 baskets. And she says, "It's okay, just take it." I said, "I'm trying to pay for it." And she says, No, don't bother me.
So if you're being honest, that's good. Bottom line, if the store owner says, forget about it, And that's it
That's
then.
different.
Quiet
That's true.
conscience.
Well,
Quiet
obviously,
conscience.
Zohar, I didn't forget it. It was 10
No,
years ago.
right. Right. And that's why it's coming up with me also, because I didn't forget it. But I'm saying is that we have to strive for honesty and do what we need to do. If they say, okay, it's okay, don't worry about it, then that's it. That's the bottom line.
Well,
Ladies,
thank you
you all
so
be
much.
blessed.
Okay,
We'll see you again next week. Bezrat Hashem. Keep the
there we
smile.
go. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
Happy birthday.
Bye-bye.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I get 2 of them.
Right. So one of the Hebrew data, the Gregorian.
Well, Shlech Lecha is the more accurate one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Very nice.
Okay, I'm gonna bye-bye. I don't know when. Here we go. I'll try this one. You have to hang up. I give up. I can't. So I don't even. Oh, here's no. Oh, there's one says leave the meeting.